Hello, everyone, and welcome back for another episode of the Outdoor Adventure Series, the podcast that celebrates individuals and families, businesses, and organizations that seek out and promote the exploration, stewardship, conservation, access, and enjoyment of the outdoors. Melanie Radzicki McManus is our guest today on the podcast. Melanie is a freelance travel writer, author, and outdoor enthusiast. Now, Melanie was introduced to us by one of our guests last year, Amy Eckert, who we interviewed about the perfect days in Michigan for day trips and the 100 things to do in Detroit before you die. I love that series. And so she has suggested you have to have Melanie on the show. And well, without further ado, Melanie, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
Excellent. So first off, I have to ask, how did you and Amy meet up? Was it on a trail somewhere? Have you kind of grown up together, go to school together? How'd you all meet?
No, Amy and I met through a travel writing organization that we both belong to, the Society of American Travel Writers. And we were about the same age, had similar interests, and we just became good friends. And now she's both my colleague and a hiking partner with me.
Fantastic. Now, are you also in Michigan? Is that where you reside, or do you live elsewhere?
I live next door in Wisconsin in the Madison area.
Oh, lovely. And I love Madison's great little town there. And how did you get interested in travel writing? Was this something you kind of studied in school, or did you just kind of find your way into it? How did that come about?
It was more the latter. I did study journalism in school, but I had never thought specifically about travel writing. And while I was freelance writing, a friend of mine who did some traveling said, "You should be a travel writer. You like to travel." And at the time, I had three little kids at home. And so my travels were mostly close to home. But I thought, well, why not? I can start writing about things close to home. And then when the kids are grown, maybe I can expand out into the rest of the US and the world. And that's pretty much what I did.
Okay. Now, did you set out as you were kind of doing this exploration and having this journalistic background that you set out to write these books? And the one I'm really intrigued about is the Thousand Miler Adventure hiking the Ice Age Trail. I mean, that sounds so intimidating to me because I think I have maybe 100 miles on me already, which is nowhere near your thousands. But how did that book come about?
It's really interesting because as a writer, I never intended to write a book. For some reason, it just it seemed like something that I wouldn't be interested in doing. And so I wrote lots of articles, web pieces, etc., and got interested first in the Camino de Santiago in Spain, which is
Oh yeah.
a long distance pilgrimage path. At
Hmm.
the time, this was 2009, I had never heard of the Ice Age Trail.
Hmm.
And it wasn't too many years afterwards that a friend of mine started talking about the Ice Age Trail. And I said, "What is that?" And he said, "Well, actually, it's a lot like the Camino you love." So he explained it's one of just 11 national scenic trails. Was all in Wisconsin and essentially in my own backyard. So I said, that's kind of crazy because I'm a travel writer who has written extensively about the state and I've never heard of this trail. So I immediately wanted to hike it all. And I also thought, well, it's going to take a while to hike it, but I bet I can write articles on it because if I haven't heard about it as a travel writer, I bet a lot of other people have not. And this was 2013. And sure enough, nobody knew anything about this hiking trail. So hiked it all, wrote a bunch of articles, and then several months later, the experience was it had such a profound impact on me that I thought I need to write a book about it, and that's how the book Thousand Miler came out.
Okay. Now I am curious, Thousand Miler. I mean, in my vantage point, that's extremely intimidating. And as I was preparing for the interview, and I was on your website and looking at some of the your products and books and articles, I noticed that there was a Thousand Miler in Michigan. I mean, this trail, I think it started from the East Coast or like Pennsylvania, drop down into Ohio, up into Michigan, and then through the Upper Peninsula. I'm thinking I couldn't even imagine 1,000 miles in Michigan, but you actually found another 1,000 miler. Is that, are there a lot of them out there?
Yes. So, as I mentioned earlier, the Ice Age Trail is one of 11 National Scenic Trails, and it's in the
Okay.
same category as the Appalachian Trail and the
Okay.
Pacific Crest Trail. That I think a
Okay.
lot of people are familiar with those two, especially the Appalachian.
Sure.
So, after I hiked the Ice Age Trail and really enjoyed that experience, I thought I am going to try and hike the other 10 before I die.
Okay.
So I'm now in the midst of that. And the trail you're referencing is called the North Country Trail. And that
Okay.
goes from North Dakota to Vermont. And it's the longest of the 11. It's
Oh, wow.
4,800 miles. And
Oh, my.
Michigan, by the way, has the largest number of miles of all the states it passes through. It has something like 1,160 miles of those 4,800.
I just can't imagine that because well, I've seen the map and I obviously have to take your word for it because you've done it. But I would not have imagined Michigan had over 1,000 miles in it for any given trail. But I guess it is a big state. Now, I want to talk more about the trails, but I also want to give credit to the 100 things to do in Wisconsin Dells before you die, because this is very much like Amy's book, The 100 Things to Do in Detroit Before You Die. How did you get involved with that series?
Yes, a good question. When I mentioned earlier that I decided to get into some travel writing, but I had young kids at home and I was not going to be able to travel very far away. One of the places I started writing about was Wisconsin Dells. It's just 40 miles from my home. So it's very convenient to get to, and it's a very popular attraction, not only in the state, but throughout the Midwest. So I have written many, many, many articles on Wisconsin Dells, and the publisher of this series, the 100 Things series, decided they wanted to include Wisconsin Dells. And so they asked the Dells Visitor Bureau, which writer do you know that knows the most about the Dells? And they said me. So they asked me to write the book. And I thought, this is very different from Thousand Miler, but you know what? I have been there so many times. I do feel like I could give a really good insights into really prime things to do in the Dells. So that's how that book came out.
Okay.
And by the
And
way, I should add, part of the Ice Age Trail goes through the Dells. So I figured, oh, great, I can promote the Ice Age Trail in that book as well.
there you go. There you go. Now, I'm curious too, is what makes a book like 100 Things to Do in Wisconsin Dells Before You Die and what you're going to write about there. And I've been to the Dells, I think, twice in my life. Okay. So not as much as you. And how do you compare that or contrast that to walking the Ice Age trails and what you're going to write about, take pictures of, and just encourage people to lean in and come out here and do this trail? What makes each of those different?
That's another good question. For those people who don't know anything about Wisconsin Dells, I'll just give a brief overview. It's an area that initially got its popularity as a tourist attraction from its natural beauty. There are some amazing sandstone formations along the Wisconsin River that were the result of the glacier melting uh, tens of thousands of years ago. And over the decade or so since it first became notable in the United States, a lot of attractions sprang up. Some of them, you might say, quality attractions like good water skiing shows and things like that. There are some other very oddball attractions.
Mhm.
Like there's a now defunct place called the Wonder Spot where you could see like an egg stand on its side and not roll over, just yeah, silly things, very silly things. So it has these two sides to it. Or maybe even three, you'd say, the natural beauty that originally drew people there, then a lot of crazy things, and then some really nice prime attractions and places to eat and things like that. And as I said, the Ice Age Trail happens to go through that whole area because it's reason for being is it traces the end of what they call the terminal moraine of the glacier, or where the last ice sheet in North America went in Wisconsin, which was its southernmost point in
Okay.
North America. So they both have glacial history, they both have scenic beauty, and then the Dells has all sorts of other crazy and fun things.
So I have to ask, I know I want to chat a little bit about your travels with your husband, but the kids, how much participation did they voluntarily or involuntarily, I might add, because you are a parent, you get to tell them what to do up to a certain age. How involved were they in some of your exploration to gather information for your books, for your articles, or they just say, Mom, you're on your own?
Oh, no, no, no. I always have to have at least one other adult and then some kids with me if I'm in a place that is kid friendly, family friendly, because you know, how would I know what a younger child would find fun? I mean, I might think I could remember back to when I was a kid, but it's always important to have different people give their opinion. So yeah, they were more than happy to come along and my husband and tell me, what do you think about this? What do you think about that? When they got too old and moved away, then I had a younger niece and nephew that filled their spot, and they helped me kid test a lot of things. So it's been a fun family adventure over the years.
So I can imagine too, they probably enjoy it when you would give a shout out to them in the acknowledgement section of the books.
Yes.
So let's talk a little bit more about the glacier trails and the what I'm curious about is these ice age trails is how do you get prepared to go on these rather long hikes? I mean, I would imagine you're not doing it all at once. Maybe you are. I mean, you could be like a through hiker in the Appalachian Trail, the Pacific Crest Trail, John Muir Trail. But how do you get prepared to go on a hike like this, all knowing that you're not just hiking or through hiking, but you're also going to be gathering information, writing, taking notes? How do you prepare for all of this?
It is a ton of logistics. And I guess the positive side for me is that I'm a pretty organized person, but I think it took me 9 months to fully prepare for the Ice Age Trail, which that one I did through hike, which means hiking it all at one time. So I spent about 6 weeks hiking that trail. And a lot of the other National Scenic Trails I've hiked, I've also through hiked, but some like this North Country Trail that we mentioned, that's 4,800 miles.
Mhm.
I've been doing that in sections I'm in my 8th year now hiking it. But yes, it takes a lot of preparation because you have to decide, am I backpacking? Am I car camping? Am I going to have somebody meet me and shuttle me around? Am I going for a day? Am I going for a week? Am I going for 6 weeks? Where am I going to eat? I mean, there's just a wealth of logistics involved. And a lot of these trails do have supporters who have the name trail angels. And they're
Mhm.
people who volunteer who say, I'm happy to shuttle a hiker. So you drop your car at one end and they shuttle you back to a certain point where you want to start and you hike to your car. Or they might say, you can stay overnight at my house, or you can use my shower or my internet or things like that. Everyone decides what they want to offer. But then it's identifying these people and finding, are you free on this day? And can you take me from this time to this place? And what time do you want to go? And yeah, it is kind of a dizzying array of details. My husband, for example, has no interest in planning any of that. So he said, you're the planner. I'll drive the car. I'll pick you up. I'll hike with you where you want, but I have no interest in these details.
Oh boy, oh boy. Now, how often does he go out with you today and when you're going out and making plans? How often is he with you?
Usually he's with me on some portion of most of my hikes. For example, I'm going to be hiking this North Country Trail. I'm near the western terminus in North Dakota. So in May, I'm going to hike from a border area with Minnesota and North Dakota to the terminus, and it's going to take me about a month. So he'll come out for maybe 5 days in there, just to experience some of it as well, and then to help me in an area where I don't have anyone who can shuttle me and there's no taxis or Uber or anything like that operating. I know.
I would
I
imagine
usually
there's no Uber or Lyft taxis in a lot of these places.
right. So it's generally where I can't find a trail angel to help me. I will say, can you get off of work from this state to this state? So I have an easier time with the logistics.
Okay. Okay. Now, regarding these trail angels, is there an organization or how do you find them?
So most of these 11 national scenic trails, but not all, have a nonprofit association that is helping build, maintain, publicize the trail. So for the North Country Trail, it's the North Country Trail Association, which is headquartered in Lowell, Michigan.
Hmm.
And Ice Age Trail has the Ice Age Trail Alliance. And if you contact these organizations or look on their websites, they have a wealth of information about literally everything. They have maps, they have chapters that are in charge of certain sections of the trail. So you can contact a chapter chair and say, I'm going to be in your area. Do you know of a trail angel? They have Facebook pages where you can post messages asking for assistance or what's the trail like today? I saw a storm went through and I don't want to hike through a lot of storm damage or whatever your sensibilities may be.
Hmm.
And they're really exceptionally useful. And I have found they're filled with people who are so passionate about getting others out on the trail to enjoy the trail. They really will help you in any way they can.
Okay. And of the Ice Age trails, how many have you completed or in the process of completing, like the trail you've just informed us about? How many others are there that you've yet to hike?
Of the National Scenic Trails,
Yeah.
yeah, okay. Um, I've done one called the Arizona Trail, the Florida Trail, of course, the Ice Age Trail, the Potomac Heritage Trail, the New England Trail, and the Natchez Trace. That's six that I did as through hikes. And then I've started the Continental Divide Trail, and I'm probably once I complete my hike in the spring, I'll be like 2/3 to 3/4 finished with that North Country Trail. But that still leaves the popular Appalachian Trail, the Pacific Coast Trail, and the Pacific, or I'm sorry, the Pacific Crest Trail and the Pacific Northwest Trail. Um, so there's still a lot of miles to go.
Okay. Thousands more, thousands more.
Yeah,
Now,
I know.
I realize there's a lot of variation here depending on which trail you're on, what part of the season. What are I don't know if you could list them, your must have belongings that you will always be bringing with you when you're out there on one of these trails by yourself and hiking? What's that list look like? That top five, top 10 list?
One thing for absolute sure are trekking poles. They have so many uses beyond helping you, say, go uphill or downhill. You can use them to measure how deep, say, there's a flooded area, how deep the water is in there. They keep if it's a hot time you're hiking, they keep your hands up in parallel so you don't get that big sausage fingers and swollen hands you can get if your hands are down by your side when you're walking in hot weather. They are supposed to take some quite a large percentage of pressure off your knees if you have knee issues. So then you can't even use them if there happens to be a wild animal as a little bit of a like stay away from me. I've got these poles in my hand. So I definitely would always have trekking poles, even if it's flat terrain. I think it still helps save energy as well. And then as far as if you're actually backpacking, there's certain lightweight gear, whether it's tent or a mattress pad, inflatable pad that I carry. If I'm car camping, I have some different items I might take. One big thing are external batteries for your phones and other devices because you can't, especially if you're backpacking, you're not going to find electricity everywhere. So you need those batteries. Headlamps are always a good idea. Medical kit, absolutely. If you're going to be in a place where you're not getting water from a tap, you need to filter your water. So there's portable water filters I carry. Seems like there was one other thing I was going to mention along with the kind of the for safety. If I'm in an area like the Continental Divide where you're really out in the middle of nowhere, I always have a Garmin satellite device that can send out messages if I don't have cell service. And actually, one of the trickiest places for cell service is the UP. There's a
Oh,
lot
wow.
of places there where you do not have service. So those are very useful.
Okay. Now, when you're out there, and I remember a friend of mine, Ethan Gogoli, wrote the Trail, which is about it was semi autobiographical, but his experience walking the John Muir Trail, and I know at certain points along the way there were, I guess, the pails or the boxes of to resupply your food stores as you're hiking. But when you are out on a hike, what do you like to eat for just to kind of keep your energy up?
Real food is always good. So if I'm have been in a town, I will grab things to make sandwiches. If I'm in a town and order a pizza for dinner that night, I'll always order a bigger size so that I can take some pizza on the trail. And I
Okay.
have to say, being from Wisconsin, cheese curds and string cheese are really great because they have protein and salt and they don't go bad right away. They're very portable. Chocolate, it's hard to eat enough calories compared to what you're burning. So
Right.
if you have foods that are really dense in calories, like cheese or chocolate, nuts is another good one. Although for some reason I don't tend to take nuts with me. I don't know why. Maybe
Okay.
I'll need to.
You never know. You never know. Now, when you're out on the trail, uh, what do you do to kind of pass the time? Because I mean, it's do you just keep walking? Do you stop and like, oh my God, look at this view? Or what's going through your mind on these trails as you're kind of out there, just step by step?
It's a lot of different things. I think in my earliest years of hiking, it was just having so much time with yourself. I think we don't realize today how busy and stressed we are. Like we might think, oh, I'm totally relaxed. I'm not stressed out at all. But you get out on a trail for a couple days and you will suddenly say, oh my gosh, this is what it's like to not be worried about going grocery shopping or gassing up the car, or I have this appointment today. It is really just so relaxing. So my first couple years hiking, I just thought my thoughts, talked to myself in my head. I don't know. Now more recently, there are times when I can get bored. I mean, like you said, there's beautiful scenery to see. You also have to pay attention to where you're going so you don't get off the trail. You have to make sure you take regular snack breaks. If you need to filter water, you have to be looking for water and stopping to filter. So there are a lot of things you're doing you have to think about. But in, say, a long stretch where maybe you don't have to think about anything for a couple miles, sometimes I'll listen to some podcasts if I have service, or I'll download books on tape or audiobooks, I should say. I'll play
Okay.
some of those. If I have service, I might call my husband to check in.
Okay.
But I have to say, I've never been bored. Never.
Okay. Now, speaking of your husband, and you mentioned how he will supply you when needed, pick you up and drop you off, depending on where you need the assistance, and the angels, trail angels, are not there. Are there some of the adventures that you have been on where he has been a willing and active part of the journey, that it's like, because it's a great time to be out there together? What are some of those instances?
Where I needed him for assistance, or where it was
No,
just
he's
enjoyable.
enjoyable. He's there. He's there for you.
Oh, yeah, yes. I mean, anytime he's with me, yeah, it's just fun to share something. He enjoys hiking, but I am much more passionate about it than he is. But it's
Mhm.
fun to share the experiences with him. It's fun to share the scenery, how he's reacting to the scenery, to the people you meet along the way. And it's even it's even kind of fun to show off, and what I mean by that is my family, that I grew up with, we did not do anything much in the outdoors. My mom took us hiking a tiny bit, but my parents were both, Chicagoans and lived
Hmm.
there until they were about 40. My siblings and I were all born there, so we typically a fun excursion would be listening to a concert or going to a museum. We didn't do outdoorsy things. So I had to learn all of this starting when I was in my 50s about how do you camp? How do you use a camping stove? How do you set up a tent? I bumbled my way through all of it, but now it's kind of fun when my husband's there to say, let me just set up the tent and show you how I do this. And I can make the meal like this. And uh, I know a lot more about some of that stuff now than he does. So it's kind of fun to
Okay.
look back on your accomplishments, I guess. And so
Very
I
good.
just kind of want to riff off of that and say, if any people who are listening who might say, I could never do that, yes, you can, because if you have seen all of the mistakes I have made and all the things I had to learn to be out there, it's actually kind of comical.
Very good. Now, in addition to your hiking, okay, actually, before I even ask that question, you mentioned the Camino at the onset of this program, and I have good friends of mine, Tim and Ruthie, who do different segments of it because I guess there's not just one Camino. And is this one of the trips that you have taken overseas to do that hike?
Yes, it started when I was invited by some representatives with Spanish tourism,
Hmm.
and they invited me. It was mostly to see the town of Santiago de Compostela, which is where the Camino ends. And I had done
Hmm.
a little research and I learned about this Camino route going into Santiago. And I thought I'd like to have come early before this trip starts and experience some of this route myself. And I happened to pick a lesser known. You mentioned there's a lot of Caminos. There's all these different routes, old pilgrimage routes from the medieval days that converge in Santiago. The most famous one when people say the Camino is this French way that goes across northern Spain. I took one called the Via de la Plata that goes northbound from Seville.
Hmm.
It goes passes through a lot of Roman ruins. And now I'm forgetting what your question was
I was just
about.
curious how much you have done it, and is this something you did
Oh,
alone by with your husband or
I
others?
did it mostly alone, but my husband joined me one time and one of my daughters joined me another time. I never did the whole thing at once because this when I discovered it, it was a time when I had my kids were still at home and younger. But at the time, in the early days of apps, when people still paid for apps, went back to at least, I think, twice a year for several years because I was created this app to the Via de la Plata Camino route. And so I kept going back to update it. And yeah, so that I've been there many times. It's an amazing experience.
I can imagine. I can imagine. When you're not hiking and writing the books and preparing and planning the logistics and all, are there any other types of writing that you're doing that our listeners would be interested in?
I do a lot of fitness articles for CNN. When you're a freelancer, you have to kind of go where the markets are going to somewhat. And 20 years ago, there were many publications, and you could have a lot of pursue a lot of specialties and interests. But now, not so much. But I've always been interested in health and fitness. So there's a lot that's intertwined between enjoying the outdoors and being fit, and they're one requires the other.
Hmm.
So yeah,
Very good. Very good. Now, getting out there on the hiking trail, are there elements of hiking that just we live in a strange times these days, but are there elements that either give you pause, like, I don't know if I want to do that, versus on the flip side of the coin, you just get so energized because you in the moment, this is just wonderful. Do you see that type of juxtaposition?
Oh, for definitely. And I think most hikers do. I mean, there's definitely going to be hard days on the trail. You might have a day where it rains all day and you're just wet and miserable, or you might have to cross a body of water that was deeper than you anticipated or you didn't know would be there. For example, especially in the North Country Trail and in the UP, there's a lot of places where beaver dams can be spring up overnight and flood an area of the trail. And then you're thinking, how am I going to get across this? And so yeah, there are times I admit I have cried on the trail sometimes.
Okay.
It's been said, like, what am I doing out here? But I think in the end, the overall experience is just so wonderful between the beauty and again, that feeling of calm and serenity and the lack of stress that it's always, to me, it's always worth it in the end. And I know a lot of women, especially, are hesitant to go out there, especially if they're alone. And I do most of my hiking alone. A
Mhm.
lot of my friends don't want to hike, or if they do, they don't want to hike the distance, or they're still working, or whatever the reason. And you obviously have to be smart about things and have ways to communicate and all of that. But really, you're much more likely to run into danger walking around a larger city than you are being out in the woods where you're mostly alone. And um, yeah, I've never run into anything that I felt was really dangerous other than a few animals.
Okay. Okay. Very good. Now, before we head out today, and I want because I think it's important to give this the acknowledgement it deserves. Tell us a little bit more about the Lowell Thomas Awards.
So the Lowell Thomas Awards are considered like the Pulitzers of travel writing, and they've been around a couple decades. I don't know how many. And it's a contest that's open to all travel journalists in North America. So it's run by a branch of a group called the Society of American Travel Writers, but you do not have to be a member to submit an entry. And I'm trying to think of probably the most prominent travel journalist whose names people might recognize would be Rick Steves of
Right.
the Rick Steves guidebooks and podcasts and things. He has won several Lowell Thomas awards. I don't know how many, but I know at least more than two or three in the years that I've belonged to SATW and heard about these awards. So it's considered very prestigious.
Okay. Now, as you kind of look back and what you have accomplished thus far, and I know you have a lot of runway ahead of you, more accomplishments. Has there been an instance where someone who maybe has picked up one of your books, read an article, and they just had a chance to meet you wherever at Starbucks or a book reading, and they said, "Wow, this what you've done was such an inspiration that I went out and I hiked some distance and got up away from my laptop and computer like I need to do actually." Has there been any instances like that?
Yes, I that's been one of the most satisfying part about not just hiking as an older woman, but also writing the book and talking, giving talks about the book, because I have had quite a few women mainly, but men, some men as well, come up and say, I never thought I could do this, but after reading your book and hearing you talk, I'm going to try. Maybe the most impressive was a woman who said she had multiple sclerosis, I believe it was. And she
Mm,
said, I want to become the first person. And she was probably about 60. She said, I want to become the first person with MS to hike the entire Ice Age Trail. And I wasn't sure if I could do it, but after hearing you and reading the book, I'm going to do it. So that really has also affected me in my career as far as I just really want people to know they can do it. As I said, I have bumbled my way learning how to tie knots and work camping stoves and set up a tent and honestly, if I can do this, anyone can do it. If you and there's also so many trails let's say you think, I want to hike, but I absolutely don't want to be totally out in the middle of nowhere. I can help you find sections of the North Country Trail or the Ice Age Trail or the Florida Trail where you can have a very easy experience, very enjoyable experience without scary incidents and things like that. Or if you're someone who says, hey, of all the trails you've hiked, I want the most adventure, I can find spots like that for you too. So that's the other thing I want people to know is you can just hike a portion of a trail and find a hike that fits your comfort level, whatever that is, because there are so many trails out there and such a wide variety. And you should be able to enjoy them. And you don't have to hike a whole trail. If there's no shame in hiking bits and pieces of it either.
You just have to do it. I was at a travel and adventure show in Denver last month, and one of a peer who is a member of the Outdoor Writers Association of America, OWAA, he was there giving a presentation with his daughter. His daughter has a severe cerebral palsy, but she just loves to get out and explore and adventure. And we're not talking asphalt or wood plank trails. And so I'm curious, can some of these trails, portions of them, can they be traversed with assistance and support if you have a physical disability of sort, whether it's sight, visual, or the physical side of like having a cerebral palsy and the like?
Definitely. Again, it just depends on matching the person to the trail. So whether it's a fear you have or an ability or a lesser ability you have, there are definitely portions that a person can enjoy. There'll definitely be portions where you wouldn't want, to send somebody, but absolutely. And also, a lot of these routes and trails, they're still being built, meaning they're not 100% off trail.
Hmm.
So while you're building a long distance trail, if a trail segment ends and it's 3 miles to the start of the next one, the organizations create what they call connecting road routes.
Hmm.
And so they usually direct you onto quiet country roads to hike, to walk, to get to the next segment if you're trying to hike a trail in its entirety. Um, so there are those, yeah, so you're not always out in the middle of nowhere.
Okay. Okay. Before we head out, any other thoughts, quote or book, something that you would like to leave with our listeners about your experience and what your profession as a writer, as a travel writer, a hiker, a passionate hiker has gifted you? Anything that you would like to gift with our to our listeners?
Well, one quote I've always liked is from Helen Keller, where she says something like, "Life is either a daring adventure or nothing." And I wouldn't necessarily say I'm a daring person, but I like to have adventures and what I term adventures anyway. I'm not doing anything super extreme, but I think you don't want to end your life regretting or thinking, maybe I should have tried to hike the Ice Age Trail, or maybe I should have tried that. I guess I wish I had. You don't want those regrets. You can always start something, and if it's not what you thought it was, then you can quit.
Mhm.
There's no shame in that either, because there are certainly some things I thought I might enjoy. Rock climbing is one that I hated it. It's not my thing, and there's nothing wrong with that. But if something is kind of calling to you, just try it. Just go for the adventure. And if it's not the adventure you envisioned, then look for another one.
I love it. I love it. And as we end today's episode, Melanie, I really appreciate you taking the time to join us and share about your adventures. If there are places you would like to send our listeners, what would be the best places to go?
Like I said, most of the National Scenic Trails, if you're interested, they have associations affiliated with
Okay.
them to get more information, like the North Country Trail Association, Ice Age Trail Alliance. if
Okay.
you're interested in what a specific trail might be like, I do also keep trail journals on my website, which is the1000miler.com. And yeah, I post every single day. I have photos. I tell what the trail was like. And I tend to read other people's trail journals before I do a section of a trail, just so I kind of have an idea what I may be in store for me. There's no guarantee, of course, because weather changes from year to year and things like that. But it's a good way to get a sense of what's out there.
Okay. Something just jogged my I don't know, light bulb went off. When you're out there listening to podcasts, besides Rick Steves, besides the Outdoor Adventure Series, which I hope you've listened to at least one of my episodes, perhaps with Amy. What are your
Yes.
favorite travel podcasts?
Ugh, right now, I'm not necessarily listening to travel ones, which I probably should. I kind of got hooked on This American Life
Okay.
and one called Beautiful Anonymous during the pandemic. And now, yeah, so, and then I listen to a lot of news things because when I'm out hiking, you kind of tend to lose, you really can forget everything. Like, oh, I forgot Halloween's around the corner, or oh, I forgot there's an election this year, or I forgot, like, you just, nothing is important to you anymore. So I try to stay on top of the news, but I will need
Okay.
to look for some good travel ones while I'm out there.
There you go. There you go. Well, Amy, Amy, oh, Melanie, it's been a pleasure to have you on today's podcast, the Outdoor Adventure Series, and I really am grateful for Amy helping to make this introduction. I know you and I had some stops and starts to get us to where we are today, but I hope you enjoyed yourself. It's been a pleasure to have you here and kind of for you to share and gift your journey with our listeners, and I do appreciate that. So, thank you so much for your time today.
Well, thanks for having me, Howard. I had a great time. And anyone wants to hike the Ice Age Trail when you're in the Madison area, look me up. If I'm not hiking myself, I will be a trail angel for you.
Very good. Oh, very good. I'm sure there will be folks who will take you up on that. Listen, stay in the line. We're going to do a quick close, and then you and I can have a final chat. Okay.
Okay, sounds good.
All right. Okay, folks, we have just been chatting with Melanie Radzicki McManus, freelance travel writer, author, outdoor enthusiast. I somewhere in the introduction, I should have said the consummate hiker. I mean, some of the hikes that she has been on are amazing. And her book, The 1000 Miler Adventures Hiking the Ice Age Trail, and all of the other national scenic trails, all 11 of them. And she just, we're grateful she has actually chatted and introduced us to some of them. And she has obviously ones that are left on her to-do list, her bucket list of sort. But really, I appreciate the energy and the enthusiasm she has for hiking and that love of hiking. And I love the fact that her family and nieces and nephew, husband have been out there with her on occasion. And I had never heard of the trail angels, and so those they kind of intrigue me as well. So who knows? Maybe we'll have a episode there in the future. Now, if you'd like to learn more about Melanie and her work, do go out to her website, the1000miler.com. We'll provide a backlink to it, as well as to her Facebook and Instagram pages as well. And we'll also provide some backlinks to some of the trail associations, and also backlink to the Society of American Travel Writers. As for us, you can find this episode on the Outdoor Adventure Series website. You can find us on LinkedIn and on Facebook at Outdoor Adventure Series, as well as on YouTube and Instagram. And also wherever you listen to your podcasts, whether you have downloaded them onto your device as you're walking the trail, or perhaps you're in the comfort of your home or walking the dog around the block, you can find us wherever you listen to your podcast. Okay, folks, wherever you are, whatever you're doing, go out there, have a phenomenal day, and we look forward to having you join us on a future episode of the Outdoor Adventure Series podcast. Take care now.